So I was preparing to run an intro campaign for some friends of mine to introduce them to D&D. So naturally, I went to D&D Beyond to look through some of my resources I have over there, and of course look through the amazing and interesting monsters that they have on D&D Beyond. But upon doing so, I came across something else pretty interesting. Specifically, I came across this new little Discover Maps button. At first, I thought it was a new map-making tool like Incarnate or Dungeon Draft or something like that, but come to find out, it's actually the new alpha version for their VTT. And no, not the 3D VTT that a lot of us have probably heard about, it's a traditional like 2D top-down style VTT. So I thought it'd be pretty interesting to give my first look and impressions of D&D Beyond's new VTT. And as someone who has used multiple VTTs before, and as someone who has also played D&D pretty much exclusively on VTTs ever since 2013 or 2014, I think I can offer a pretty unique perspective on this new upcoming VTT being made by D&D Beyond. There is a virtual tabletop gold rush going on right now. Everyone's trying to create their own unique one, and never before has there been so many VTTs on the market or in development. So to see D&D Beyond step up to the plate with not one but two different VTTs, that's a pretty big deal. So in order to access this new D&D Beyond VTT, you first need to have a Master Tier subscription, or at least the Dungeon Master needs to have a Master Tier subscription in order to begin inviting people and letting them use the VTT. But who knows, they may change that in the future. But let's start off by talking about the most important part of any VTT, which is creating a scene or a battle map. So as you can tell, as soon as you launch maps, the first thing it asks you is to choose one of your campaigns that you've made previously to be the kind of base for the adventure, or if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you can choose some of the pre-made adventures that they have. Then it sends you to this map browser screen where you're able to upload your own maps, select one of D&D Beyond's basic maps, or choose one from one of the adventures you've purchased. And then once you select the map, it gets put on the map directory at the top of the screen where you can freely swap between scenes if you want to. The first thing that I notice about this map browser compared to other VTTs is that there's not a whole lot here. What's nice is that they have some pre-made ones that you can go into and select and mess around with if you want to, but you would think that if it's D&D Beyond, there would be hordes of pre-made ones already in here. I happen to own a lot of source books that have battle maps in them on D&D Beyond, and so I was expecting all of those to be here already, but they're not, which is a little interesting. But the source books section seems to be blank, and the adventures section only has Stormwreck Isle despite me owning multiple different source books and adventures that I know for a fact have battle maps included. However, I did notice a bug that no matter what pre-made adventure I seemed to choose, the Stormwreck Isle maps were the only ones that seemed to ever appear. So as you can kind of see, I tried making multiple Lost Mine of Phandelver campaigns or adventures or whatever, but no matter which one I chose, it always seemed to give me the Stormwreck Isle maps, which is just not that big of a deal, but just a weird bug that I happened to notice. And this next thing isn't that big of a deal, but I did notice that some of the maps that were pre-loaded from Stormwreck Isle were pretty poor resolution. So I hope that they up the resolution for their maps, because I know that there are some players out there, myself included, who like to zoom in close to their token to get immersed with their character. And obviously if the map is super blurry and low resolution, it can kind of take away from that experience. But anyways, moving on. The first thing that I noticed about this map browser is that there isn't a whole lot here as of yet. After all, it is still an alpha. So maybe that's just a bug, or maybe I failed to find a setting where I can turn on access to all of those source books, but as far as I know, that may just be a bug on D&D Beyond's part. But again, this is still an alpha, so I don't expect them to have all of their resources already integrated into the VTT, but even still, it would have just been nice if they had that already, so that way I could mess around with some of the maps. But regarding uploading your own map, which is a crucial part of any VTT, it actually works pretty well. And I really like the method of adjusting the map size that D&D Beyond uses. D&D Beyond's VTT has you adjust it using this nifty little window to fit your tokens to the grid, which is a pretty unique way of adjusting the map, or at least in my opinion. And of course, you can't run encounters without monsters, but even that seems pretty straightforward. You just have to go to the token tab and search whatever monster you want, and then click the little plus button to add them to the scene. However, something else that I did notice is that you can't click and drag a token onto the map. It just kind of places them in the middle of it. So if you're trying to sneakily add in some monsters to an encounter, you can't really do that because they just get plopped on the battlefield in a single filed line. But moving on to combat, since that's a really big part of D&D of course, running encounters using this VTT might be a bit challenging as of now, because currently there isn't a stat keeping system for token HP or damage dealt or things like that, at least as far as I know. On top of that, there are still some basic issues that I noticed when messing around with the VTT. Surprisingly, the token movement felt fairly smooth for it being an alpha, and there wasn't too much latency unless of course you got really crazy with your movements, but there isn't a snap to grid function currently, so you can just kind of move your token wherever you want. And speaking of moving your token, the Fog of War doesn't stop token movement. And as of now, or at least as far as I could tell, there isn't a way to set up token permissions, and for those of you familiar with VTTs, that's kind of a big issue, because that means that as long as you're in the session, you can just kind of click around in the dark until you grab a token and see what it is, or you can just move a monster or another player's tokens around willy-nilly. So if you have a problem player, or perhaps a player who just wants to cause chaos, they can just click and drag whatever they want, whenever they want, and you can't really stop them. And something else that I noticed is that if you wanted to do something else with your token, like rotate it, or maybe add a little colored marker to it so that you can keep track of conditions or something, well, you can't really do any of those things, as of now at least. So in my opinion, as of now, there isn't really a good way for combat to take place because there isn't a stat keeping system. But there is a chat function that will post a character's roles in it as long as they're in the campaign that you enabled back when you first set up the session. So that's cool, I guess. But something else that I noticed is that currently there isn't really a way for the game master or the players to quickly access their player or another monster's character information while remaining inside the VTT, if that makes sense. So in other VTTs, you can quickly access a monster's information by normally double left clicking on the token or pressing C on your keyboard or whatever to bring up your character sheet, and you can kind of have it like minimized off to the side a little bit. Well, in this VTT, at least as of now, there isn't really a way for you to do that, meaning that you have to have multiple tabs open if you're a game master with all the monsters on them, or if you're a player, have the D&D Beyond app open on your phone or tablet to access that information and keep track of those stats. And for you as the game master, it means that you have to do things the quote-unquote old-fashioned way by having either pen and paper and keeping track of those monster stats that way, or use the D&D Beyond Encounter app, which is still in beta. So, as I'm sure you can probably tell by now in this point in the video, the D&D Beyond VTT is kinda empty, but again, it is an alpha, so give it some grace because of course it's still in development. But with that being said, I'm not really sure how often they're going to be updating this, considering that they're already focusing and directing all of their resources towards the 3D VTT, which is what they've been kind of advertising over these past couple of months. So in full honesty, I'm kind of expecting this VTT to kind of become the neglected child of D&D Beyond, so to speak, because they've already proven that they were putting a lot of time and effort and resources into the 3D VTT, so I don't really know how quickly or how often this VTT is going to get updates or patch notes or development updates or whatever. But hey, speaking of development, let's actually take a look at the roadmap that they have here posted on the home screen for D&D Beyond maps and see what the future holds for this new and upcoming VTT. Okay, so the number one thing that they're evidently focusing on are tool improvements, adding a pointer tool and draw tool. Okay, I guess that's pretty important. Token enhancements. Okay, that's kind of what I was talking about earlier in regards to fixing token permissions. That's really important for VTT. Game session functionality, additional user controls, tool improvements, game log, all pretty standard stuff. Okay, but what I'm not seeing is something that really stands out from the other VTTs. This is all pretty standard stuff, and that's something I'm a bit worried about for this VTT specifically. I was hoping to see a point that talked about sound effects or audio integration or something, because that's pretty standard amongst most VTTs nowadays, but I don't really see that, or at least not right now. Maybe it's just included in one of these points that I missed, or maybe it's just not mentioned. But I would say that's a pretty important thing that I would hope this VTT would include at some point. And another thing that I'm really happy about is that they're giving this roadmap and they're actually showing what they're planning to do. And some of these things, as I'm sure you can tell, are things that I've already kind of talked about in this video. So I'm happy to see that they plan on adding these things in the future. However, one thing that I am a little worried about is that they don't give a due date or an expected date, which I kind of understand because especially in recent years with games like Halo Infinite and 2042, they give these very promising due dates, and then when time comes to deliver, they do not. But anyways, that's besides the point. The one thing that sets this VTT apart from the others, in my opinion, is that it's a first-party VTT, meaning that it's made by WotC and integrated directly into D&D Beyond, meaning you have direct access to all of the rules, monsters, and adventures that you've already purchased, meaning that you don't need to buy them again and can just integrate them into your VTT when you would normally need to buy them again on another VTT like Roll20, for example. And for me, that's the big selling point for this VTT, because with other VTTs like Roll20, for example, if you buy an adventure, it gives you all of those things in Roll20, but then you can't access them or download them anywhere else unless otherwise specified, unless of course you purchase them elsewhere or purchase a physical book or in D&D Beyond or something. But honestly, that's the only real advantage that I see this VTT having over the others as of now. I mean, at least according to the roadmap and the dev logs and other things that they posted on YouTube, and from everything that I can read about so far, there isn't really anything that sets this VTT apart from the others in terms of performance or anything else. Because most VTTs nowadays have something that's a really big selling point, whether it be user experience, animations, immersion, or you name it. And this one, as of now, doesn't really have anything besides the fact that it's a first party, the official VTT for D&D, if that makes sense. So for example, Foundry has a massive modding community which allows you to completely customize your experience. Roll20 is very user-friendly and has an official marketplace where people or companies can post their RPG products. And Alchemy offers a completely in-depth experience with an emphasis on immersion. So if D&D Beyond's biggest selling point for this VTT is that it's a first-party product and nothing else, then I'm not sure how well it'll stand up against VTT giants like Foundry, Fantasy Grounds, and Roll20, whose communities are constantly growing by the day. But I'm honestly really curious to see where they'll take this VTT in the future and what direction they'll try to go for, whether it be complete combat automation, or immersion, or complete seamless integration with all of D&D's massive compendiums and adventures. But I guess it remains to be seen. So as of now, and in all honesty, D&D Beyond's Maps VTT isn't really worth it. It's still in alpha, it's still in development, and it's missing a lot of features that make VTTs really good and not just a Photoshop presentation with a couple of click and drag elements. And of course, since it's an alpha, it is a little bit buggy at times. But with that, let me know what you guys think about this VTT in the comments down below. Do you think Maps is worth it and you'll eventually use it in the future? Do you think it shows some potential? Or do you think it's even worth it or not? What are some things that you hope they'll add to this VTT in the future? Or if you hate it, what are some things that you just dislike about it entirely when compared to your VTT of choice? It's always really interesting to hear your guys' perspectives, and I look forward to reading them in the comments down below. But as always, everybody, thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take it easy. Bye-bye.